Welcome back to the third episode of Shrektober, where we're going to be playing Shrek 2 on the Game Boy Advance. Is it going to be fun? Probably not. It's Shrek 2, but in game form. Just like Hassle at the Castle, this game sort of just retells the events of the movie it's based on. Same sort of still image cutscenes, same basic story beats, that's it. The key difference here is that I don't think they used images from the film all that much. There are certain times where they clearly did, but others just look off. Almost as if they were redrawn from memory, except whoever drew them had Alzheimer's. While that's admittedly pretty terrible, the game actually does take some lines of dialogue almost verbatim from the movie, which even Hassle at the Castle didn't do. I guess on that front they're kind of balanced between those two games. Let's go with the Silverbolt here, since it's about on the same level as Hassle at the Castle as far as plots go. They're still pretty much shovelware, and they wouldn't match up with the scores of more developed games, but they're not bad for shovelware stories. This game is interesting. I'd never even thought that this sort of genre existed before playing this game. Shrek 2 is a one-player co-op puzzle platformer. Now, I'm sure right now you're saying, what? But that's actually a thing apparently. In this game, you must control different combinations of 5 different characters, and you must use their different skill sets to traverse through each level. You can control each one individually or control them all at once, depending on the situation. The most you'll ever have to control in any given level is 3, but the game actually makes use of each character's strengths pretty well. The A button is jump, B is the attack button for each character, L or R swaps which character is active, and select picks up special items like the invincibility shields that make you really heavy, a ghost power-up that makes you invisible to spotlights, or a fairy that gives you a gliding descent if you're holding A in midair. Let me run down each character before I elaborate too much more. There's Shrek, who's slow and can't jump very high, but packs a punch, literally, and has a lot of health. He can also pick certain items up like springs. Donkey has less health but can jump higher and kick items into place. Puss in Boots can climb up walls and slide on rails, and he attacks using his sword. Gingy can jump insanely high, and he's a goddamn ninja, like seriously. He can throw these candy canes in a bunch of different directions and even rapid fire them. However, he has the lowest health in the game. And then there's Shrek's human form, where he wields a sword. Once you get to the point in the game where Shrek becomes human, he pretty much replaces Donkey. His sword can knock items into place, but also reflect projectiles back at enemies, somehow. In most cases, the levels where you control multiple characters are designed in such a way that you have to continually swap between them for each concurrent section of each level. You may have to jump up onto some trees as Donkey and do some platforming just to find this spring that you kick down for Shrek so that he can reach the next area. Only then can you progress, and then in the next room Shrek may need to hold another spring so that Donkey can reach the next ledge, and so on. This makes the game really tedious at times, and honestly it's a fault that greatly damages what's otherwise a really neat concept. At first it's fun occasionally to come into a new room and have to figure out which character has to get the next door open, but it becomes repetitive really quickly. The game rarely branches out beyond the basic formula of do a section as X, then switch to Y, then back to X, and then maybe throw Z in there at some point, and then end the level. The most annoying part about this constant back and forth gameplay is having to have each character play catch up at the end of each section. While you can unite all the characters on screen and get them to move as one by holding both L and R, because each character has a different feel, it's always a gamble to do that later on, when there are bottomless pits in between many rooms. That's not a huge deal since there are infinite lives, and the levels are usually no longer than a couple minutes, but it can get pretty infuriating when you're right at the end of a level, only to die because of a simple slip-up or because of these damn guards that turn you into slugs. These guys almost always come in packs, and they fire so quickly that you usually don't have the time to dodge or beat them before they attack, and they one-hit kill you. The ranged enemies in general have this sort of problem though. This jump right here kept throwing me off because Puss in Boots wouldn't latch onto the wall, and he kept getting hit by the archer because he instantly fires his arrows. The other enemies in the game are pretty much pushovers though, especially when you attack as all 3 characters at once. There are the usual guards, some pumpkin heads, a guy with a bag full of the pumpkin heads, and some other guards that you can't actually hurt. There are also a couple boss fights in this game, such as this fight with Puss in Boots. Okay, on one end, I gotta give him props for referencing the movie with Puss's cartwheel attack. On the other hand, no I don't! That is his entire moveset as a boss. Instead of creating an enemy AI based on Puss's actual sprite from when he's a playable character, they just drew a single sprite and made him spin like crazy. I mean, yeah, that's friggin' hilarious, but that's also terrible. Also, this is how I beat the final boss. Boss fights aren't this game's forte. Thankfully, only a couple of the game's 25 levels are boss fights. Besides all this, in most levels there are 40 coins you can collect that don't really do anything except act as arbitrary collectibles, and these hidden leprechauns that warp you to some random minigames that do nothing. That aside, I gotta give the development team credit on this one. This game is really unique to me. It was made by Vicarious Visions, a very prolific team that's done a lot of ports and licensed games in the past. You probably know them as the guys behind some of the Skylanders games, and the team working on the Crash Bandicoot remasters that are due out in 2017. From what I can tell, they actually put a good amount of love into their games, and it shows here. However, while the concept is neat, the execution falls pretty flat to me, and because of that, I've got to give the game a bronze bolt for its gameplay. While neat might be a decent way to describe the gameplay in concept alone, neat is not a good way to describe how this game looks and sounds. I can definitely tell each character apart, and the animations aren't terrible, minus that godforsaken cartwheel, and in fact, everything is fluid in terms of sprite design. Shrek and Donkey in particular look really solid, almost as if the character models were ripped right out of the films and then converted into sprites Donkey Kong Country style. The levels look pretty nice as well. However, just like the gameplay, the problem comes the further into the game you trek. There are only a handful of assets used in this game, so almost every level by the time you get to the third or fourth chapter is designed with these copied and pasted visuals. It all starts to fall apart once the levels blend together into one homogeneous lump. Likewise, there are only a couple of songs in this game. In fact, this game has the smallest soundtrack of any of the 4 Shrek games I played for Shrektober. When 20% of the game's levels play in a row, with the same level backgrounds and the same music, how am I supposed to differentiate between each individual level? The themes we have aren't bad by any means, and I do actually like a couple of them, but the ones that are memorable are usually the ones that are only played once and at very distinct points in the game. For example, Gingy's stealth level theme. Also, as an aside here, each character has a grunt or two that actually sounds like the character from the movie. Isn't it kinda weird to you that a Game Boy Advance Shrek game has more voice acting for the main character than one of the GameCube games does? Because so many assets are reused so many times, I can't really justify giving the game anything more than a bronze bolt for its presentation. This game really is cool on paper. Of the 3 Shrek games I've touched on so far, this is the only one I would consider recommending that anybody actually try. However, it's not something I can recommend in full because of how repetitive it gets about halfway in. I could honestly see this concept being repurposed into something really, really cool with the right designer at the helm, but I hadn't experienced a game like this before this game. Most of the games I was able to find that do follow this sort of concept are, interestingly enough, licensed games, with the exception of one, The Lost Vikings on the Super Nintendo and Genesis, made by Blizzard of all teams. So perhaps if you're interested in the concept, you should try that game out instead. If there's one good thing to come out of Shrektober this year, it's that I found out that The Lost Vikings exists, because I'm actually really interested in how that game looks and seems to play. One more game, and one more day. I'll see you guys tomorrow for Shrek Super Slam on the Nintendo GameCube.